Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? Hope you're doing good out there. So I hope you're also in the mood for some relationship skills talk today, because that's what we're going to do. This is part of the Interpersonal Effectiveness module, and it's a newer part that was added in the updated manual that came out a few years ago. So this is about building and ending relationships. Okay, so obviously we need relationships throughout our lifetime. And we often have to replace old relationships that die out with new ones, or we move to new places or get involved in new activities and need to meet new people. We grow as a person, so we therefore need to add new people to our life that are maybe closer to what we're interested in right now, because we evolve and need people to kind of match our interests as we get older. And sometimes, old relationships don't work out anymore, and we need to kind of decide whether they should continue or not. Especially if we try to work through issues and we realize it's just not happening. Okay, so we're going to talk about both ends of the dialectic, so to speak. All right, but most of the energy is going to be spent on building relationships. All right, so the first part is about finding and getting people to like you. That's kind of the beginning of how we build a relationship. So one of the first things we could try is to look for people that are close by. So this has to do with proximity. So if you tend to see the same people in the same kind of places on a regular basis, it's much easier to become friends practically, right? So if you have a neighbor that you see a lot, or maybe you work and you meet the same coworkers all the time and you end up having lunch together or meeting after work to hang out, that's a good place. Sometimes if you have an interest and you join a certain club with all the same people, the same interests, that's a great place to do it too. But the idea is to do something where people meet regularly. If there's a club where it only meets like twice a year and different people come each time, that may not be the ideal place to make new friends. Okay, so think of what in your life would make sense for this. And one thing to keep in mind, though, is once you stop the proximity, it may be hard to sustain the relationship. So if you were really great friends with a neighbor and then you move to another town, you might keep in touch, but it's not going to necessarily be the same, right? Or if you're working at a certain job and you're there with the same people every day and then you get a new job, you might hear from them occasionally, but it may not be like the same kind of connection that you had before. So in that case, you might need to, start over again and meet some additional people. Okay, but always having that group that's around is pretty helpful. Okay. All right, so it also helps to look for people that are similar to you. So it's easier to connect with people that you have stuff in common with, right? So maybe you share an interest, maybe you both like sports, maybe you like DBT, maybe you have similar political views, or you're working in a volunteer group together and you both are very passionate about it. So having those things in common are really helpful, okay? All right, next. Working on conversation skills. So this is a great part of the interpersonal kind of stuff working in, all right? So when you're talking to somebody, and I know for some of you this might be obvious, but for some of you it may not be, which is okay. Try to engage the other person by maybe asking them some questions, just general questions. It doesn't have to be really deeply personal, just to show an interest in them, show that you're trying to get to know them. And if they ask you questions, try to give more than a one-word answer. So if someone says, well, how's your day going? And you just say, okay, they're going to be like, okay, so give a little bit more than just a brief response. Tell them at least maybe one thing about your day, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking probably to dialogue with you, and they want to hear more because it helps keep the conversation moving. All right, and chit chat about casual topics. So keep it light, especially if you don't know the person really well. Maybe something that's going on in the world, the news, or in the place that you both are working at, or the neighborhood that you're both living in. Maybe there's some local stuff going on you can chat about, right? It's also important to self-disclose skillfully, meaning you might be really excited about the person, right? And you want to get to know them and you want to have a fast friendship or a fast relationship. And so you start spilling your guts about stuff. But if it's too soon and it's too much, you're going to end up feeling uncomfortable later. And they might feel uncomfortable too. They might feel like, geez, I'm not sure why this person's telling me that. I barely know her or know him, right? So you both want to stay in a comfortable zone. So if you're not really sure how much to share, maybe kind of gauge it by what is the other person sharing? And maybe I'll share around the same amount. So if they're telling me a little about their family, I'll tell them a little about my family, but maybe not the deep, dark, dirty secrets. Okay, so something like that. And also, it helps a lot just to show you're listening. So remember the act interested skill from Give, right? This is a perfect opportunity to do that. So make good eye contact, nod your head, ask a couple of questions to follow up with what they're saying. And it shows that you care, okay? And that helps to build a friendship. All right, so more conversation skills. We got a whole other slide for it. So if you work on your own life, right, even in the absence of other people, and you develop your own interests, maybe there's stuff you really like to read about, or there's a hobby you like to pursue, or there's certain kinds of documentaries you like to watch, go for it. If you do more of that stuff and then you talk about it, it makes you a more interesting person. And it looks like you're not relying on other people to make your life meaningful for you, right? You kind of be happy with the stuff that you like to do, and then you could share it with other people and they could share their stuff with you. All right, another little tip. They talk about this in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, from like the 1930s, but it's still super important now. Try to remember people's names if you can, right? Ever have somebody come up to you and they get your name wrong and you already met them and you remembered their name and they totally screwed up your name? It's like so annoying, right? Or if they spell your name wrong, especially if you have an odd name that may be a little hard to spell. You might say, well, yeah, it's typical, it happens all the time, but it also feels like a little insulting because your name is what you feel like is attached to you. And if someone remembers you and feels like you're important enough to them, they try to remember your name. So we got to keep that in mind for the other people we meet. So when you meet them, try to repeat the name out loud, try to repeat it to yourself in your mind so you can kind of help it stick. Maybe write it down or text it in your phone, put it in your address book so you kind of got it steady for the next time. Okay, so also try to validate the person, learn to see things from their point of view, and you could help communicate that during the conversation. So that kind of reaches across the aisle and helps to bridge the gap between you, right? So maybe they have different kinds of experiences than you do, but if you show an understanding, that makes a nice impression. And similarly, talk about things the other person's interested in. So instead of it being like me, guess what I like to do? Guess me, focus on the other person too. Make sure that you're balancing out the conversation by not just talking about yourself, but asking about them, their self, right? And maybe even bringing up topics that they like. And so that shows that you're interested in their world. And of course, be mindful of the way you might be coming across. So try to use open and friendly body language. Smile if you can, right? It makes you look more open and interested. Okay. Express liking, and they add selectively. Okay, you like that little picture? It's cute, right? So the ruler is saying, you rock, and the rock saying, you rule. Okay, cute, right? So the important thing here is to look for the positives, right? So if you notice something nice the other person does or is doing, or you like the outfit they're wearing, or you like a personal quality, sometimes you could point that out to the person and show them that you noticed, and it feels good to get a compliment. So make sure it's an appropriate way, given the relationship, not in a weird or creepy way. Okay, so watch out for that. But it makes the person feel like you're paying attention and you like them. Okay, so if you're at a party or some kind of a social gathering, this is a skill you could keep in mind for that. So if there's like a bunch of little groups standing around, or little circles of people talking, and you're there by yourself, or you don't really know too many people, try to look at the body language and what's going on with the people that are around you. So if you see a group where the people look a little bit more open, maybe they don't know each other that well too, and they're just kind of awkwardly talking a little, maybe they're looking around, or the composition of where the people are standing is a little bit open, or there's a little space, maybe you could kind of start to walk up to them and say, oh, can I join you? Or listen in for a little bit and see if you could maybe say something if it seems appropriate. All right, so this is kind of like a party skill, all right, or a gathering skill. All right. So here it is again, okay? You can't escape it. Mindfulness is in DBT everywhere you go. So you could actually practice a mindful approach to relationships. Whoops. And that helps your relationships. So quick review. So what is mindfulness? So mindfulness is fully awake and embodied awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment. So let's think about relationships. When you're conversing with somebody, doesn't it help to pay attention on purpose in the present moment, right? Listening carefully, showing them you're listening, observing what's going on. Right, absolutely. All right, so a quick reminder too of the 3 pillars of mind from Dan Siegel. So mindfulness has three components. So focused attention. So if you're in a conversation, focusing on what the person's saying, how they're coming across, and their nonverbals. Open awareness. So kind of like whatever floats into your awareness, just allow it to come in and out without getting overly focused on any one thing. So let's say my thoughts come into my awareness, right? And I have a plan of what I want to say next. Instead of getting too hooked on that, I just let it go and I go back to the moment, okay? And kind intention, right? We talked about being kind to the person, observing what's nice about them and giving them compliments and so forth. If we have a kind intention with the person we're with, chances are they'll pick up on that, right? So they talk about loving kindness meditation, and that's kind of wishing others and yourself well. So even if we do that silently, sometimes that kind of gives off a certain vibe, and that helps us, connect with people and build better relationships. Okay, so they're going to do the observe, describe, participate, what skills here, and show how this functions in relationships. So observing in relationships, right? So paying attention with interest and curiosity to what's going on with the other person or people, okay? And instead of doing, other things and kind of getting distracted, like looking at your phone or, not, doing other things or like getting wrapped up in your thoughts, try to mindfully, house skill, pay attention to the other people you're with. Staying in the present moment. So instead of allowing, again, like your thoughts to drift somewhere else, bring yourself back to the present moment of being with that person. And when you can really be in the moment with the person and you feel that interconnection, it feels so much more satisfying than if you're half somewhere else. You can gain the full benefit of that interpersonal connection. All right? So let go of focus on self instead of focus on others, especially like letting go of what you think you want to say and just listening and trusting that if you have something important to say, it'll come to you. Being open to other people and what the information about themselves that they're sharing. Noticing judgmental thoughts and allowing them to come and go, right? Also part of mindfulness, part of that open awareness. And also giving up clinging to always being right. So you might get a little too focused on like, but she said something wrong and I didn't like what she said. And, and I got to correct her, or, I don't want her to win the argument. I want to win the argument, right? So letting go of being right. Notice the urge to try to be right or to control and try to let that go. So just observe that urge. Okay, describe. So describe is in a neutral way, objective way, putting words to what's going on. So this is important, especially if you catch yourself judging the other person or people you're with, right? Or comparing them to other people. So try to shift from there to focusing more on the facts of what's going on, okay? And if you're judging, chances are you're seeing things a little too narrowly. Maybe you're not being super fair about what you're seeing, and you're not being open fully to the other people. You might have to check the facts if you're, forming opinions or creating stories in your mind about what the person thinks of you, or what their motives are in dealing with you. Maybe you have a whole big story going on about why they're being so nice. What's their motive? What do they want from me? Are they just being nice because they feel sorry for me? Are they being nice because they want a favor? Right? Sometimes we have all these theories that are going through our mind, but we could just notice that, check the facts, or just notice those thoughts and let it go. Okay, because sometimes that gets in the way. we have this whole interpretation about what's going on, and it could be kind of false, right? We have a lot of misunderstandings in relationships, so we need to clarify them. And you might just have to have a conversation with the person about it, just to make sure, we're seeing things clearly. All right, and giving others the benefit of the doubt. I tell people sometimes just take it at face value. You don't have to overthink things or assume a negative motive or assume that something's wrong. Try to just give them the benefit of the doubt. If they didn't say anything is wrong, just take it at face value, assume it's okay. All right? Okay. And participate, the other what skill. So participate is about living the mindfulness, fully being in the moment with mindfulness. So participating fully in the relationship is being mindful in the course of the interactions you're having with other people. They also suggest going with the flow of it, not trying to control what's going on, just kind of like allowing everything to unfold. Just like we're not supposed to control the thoughts and the things that come into our awareness, we're just supposed to let them flow in and out. Just like when you're interacting with somebody, there's a certain flow that happens. So instead of trying to steer it a certain way, just kind of like see how it goes, right? Kind of go for the ride. All right. So inevitably, a lot of relationships develop issues, and we need to figure out ways to work these through. Now, this is probably, a whole topic in itself, but I'm just going to touch on it just to acknowledge that it exists. Okay, so sometimes it's hard to know what to do if a relationship issue comes up. And sometimes it's easier to end a relationship than to work through it. But I would want to encourage you to try to work it through if you can. Sometimes it's just a matter of clearing the air. It's a matter of expressing what's wrong or how you're feeling and having a conversation, even if it's a little uncomfortable. But if the relationship's important to you, it's worth it to try. And sometimes, another person from the outside could help, whether it's a friend or a therapist or a family member that can give you some advice about how to do it or be present while you do it. But, that's something to consider for sure. So another thing that you could do too is the cope ahead skill. So sometimes people easily get stressed out about relationship issues. So if you're about to see the person, let's say later this week, and you're concerned something's going to come up, cope ahead, plan it out, try to figure out what you could say, how you could communicate better, how you would want to, work through an issue if you're ready to discuss an issue, and maybe even role play with somebody. Okay. So these are all just things to keep in mind. Again, I'm not going into great detail here, but just know that this comes up with relationships too. So once you, build the relationship or start the relationship down the road, the issues could be one of the things to address. Okay, so finally, sometimes we need to end relationships, okay? Not everything's meant to last forever, even if we want it to, okay? And sometimes the ending is mutual and both parties kind of agree that this isn't really working out for us. And sometimes it's one-sided. Sometimes you're the one side that wants to pull out, and sometimes it's the other person. And you want to stay and the other person wants to leave. And that's painful. It's also painful when you choose to leave, because there's probably part of you that, still, wishes it was the way it used to be. So there's a mourning process here. All right. Sometimes it's very necessary to end a relationship if it's abusive or if it's toxic or damaging in some way. And it could be hard because you could fear retaliation from the person or fear that they're going to do something to hurt you. So that takes special consideration, and you have to do it safely and get help in that process if necessary. But sometimes it's entering a relationship is just a matter of you two growing in different directions. Let's say you're in DBT and you've been working on yourself, and now you're in a very different place than you were a couple of years ago when you met that person. And you don't have a lot in common anymore because, you just think differently. You're operating your life differently, and they're not. And so you wish it would work out, but it's just, you're just so different now, and it's hard, but sometimes you have to admit that, this relationship needs to end or needs to be different. Sometimes a relationship, if it's a friendship, might evolve where maybe you were really close at one point, but now it's less close. Maybe you don't live as close, so you see each other once in a while, or it's a little bit more casual or superficial, whereas before it was a lot closer. So, you know, that could be part of the change. Maybe it's not a complete break, but it's a shift. And other times, you know, based on proximity, that could change. Like I said before, like let's say you were coworkers and you hung out all the time, you had lunch together every day, and now one of you got a different job and you don't see each other as much. And when you do see each other, you don't have as much in common because you're not working in the same place. So you may find that like either we're not so close and we don't hang out at all, or maybe just once in a blue moon, but it's not what we used to have. Okay, so this is part of the challenge. It's always hard, but it's inevitable. Okay. And if you're struggling to let go, you know, because let's say you still really love the person and they left you, you could do things such as opposite action for love to help cope with it. So some of the opposite action for love is, you know, you may have to stop reaching out to them all the time, stop the texts and the calls, you know, put some space between you. And if you're obsessing about the person, still try to distract yourself from love thoughts, you know, or obsessive love thoughts about the person. All right, so that, and get support for sure. Okay, so I believe this is the end of that presentation. All right, so that wraps up interpersonal effectiveness. There's going to be another video summarizing all the skills, so that'll be next. But this is the last new skill we're going to talk about for interpersonal. So hope that helps a little bit. Hope it helps you rebuild some new relationships, you know, start over, meet some new people. Okay, because we all need people. We need each other. Okay, so that's all for now, and I'll see you soon. All right, bye everybody.